Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Party Day all the way from Barnsley, South Yorkshire. Because recently I spoke to their guitarist, Carl Firth, to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Also, just to say, they've got a compilation that's come out on Optic Nerve recordings all the way from Preston. And this is a comprehensive collection of all their recordings plus demos. And as with everything that's come out on Optic Nerve recordings, it is a classic. And also the band, even though 40 years ago they were recording this material, are still sounding brilliant. So do check that out and buy a copy. Anyway, look, this is my interview with Carl, and after several minutes of casual chat, we got down to that very exciting subject that was the early formative years. I know, classic start. Anyway, Carl, it's over to you.
That is incredible that you mentioned that. My first single was David Bowie, Driving Saturday. Right. And I remember asking my mum when I was 10 for some red and white platform shoes because I was into sweet. And I remember headbanging to all kinds of sweet songs and Bohemian Rhapsody in the bedroom and stuff like that. Right. I was into the glam stuff. I mean, the first record I remember getting was ABBA and then The Shadows. And there's a totally bizarre range of records that I've listened to as a kid. But I suppose the earliest influence I remember was Bowie, which faded away, I'll admit. But as a kid, it was Bowie, and also the glam rock type stuff. But then by, I guess, 14, the founder members of the band before Party Day, which we were called Further Experiments in a Crowded Laboratory, they're splendidly named. That was my brother and Martin, who was the guitarist singer in Party Day. Of course, they decided they wanted to form this band, and they were listening to music like the Jam at the point, yes, which moved on to bands like The Damned, and then onto The Cure and The Skids, and so I got a whole mix of things, and mixed into that, I suppose, the other album that I played completely to death was Kate Bush.
What, the Kicking Side?
Yeah, strange mixture of things, but if I think back to the main influences that I had as a kid, the records I played to death was the Skids, Scared to Dance, and the Jam, All Mod Cons. Oh, and then Stranglers, Rattlesnake and Black and White. So those were my influences at sort of 14-ish, 15-ish, when I was first started playing in the band. Yeah, so that was a thing. Because I was about 14 when we first joined the band.
Yeah, so you had an older brother who had a bit of an influence on you then. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Greg played in the band as the four-piece originally, and he was working at a local steelworks, and then decided he was going to go to university when he was 20. So he left the band, and that left us as a three-piece, which was the core of Party Day in the first stages, which was Martin, Mick, and myself.
Yes. I was going to say, were your parents at all of a musical? Did they have a music passion?
Well, my parents weren't. My dad played violin extremely badly, but made violins. He used to make violins in his spare time. Oh. He was a woodworker for a local foundry, but his passion was woodwork, so he made violins. So there's a bit of a musical influence there. My mum played piano, but we never heard her play it because we didn't have a piano. Both my granddads played piano really well, like for the silent movies in the cinema and classical pieces. Right. So that was where my musical grounding came from. My granddad, from age 5 to 10, I used to go and have to play the scales and Schubert and all kinds of classical music, which I hated with a passion, and gave it up as soon as my mum would let me. But that came back to help me at 14 when my dad came home one day from a sales meeting and said, lads, I've brought you something. And he brought us two high watt bass amps.
Right.
And a bass guitar, which was a Baldwin Baby Bison, which is a classic guitar, that someone had drilled 2 more machine heads into the top and turned it into a 6-string. So my dad, being the woodworking man that he was, thought, I can fix that. Brought it home, changed it back into a bass. That was my first bass. My brother was working, so he paid for it. But then he said, I'll play guitar and you play bass. And that was really the formation of the core of the band originally. Yes. So I've got my dad to blame for all this.
That's so impressive, actually. Because you were born, and this was near Barnsley in a place called
Wombwell. Yeah, everybody calls it Wombwell.
Yes.
When we lived there, it's Wombwell.
Yes.
Yeah, I was born in Wombwell, which is about 4 or 5 miles from the centre from Barnsley town centre. So it's one of the outlying little towns around Barnsley.
Yes, and what was it like culturally because I was brought up in the countryside in East Anglia, and it was not, there wasn't a lot going on. It was very farming, rural. There wasn't a lot of culture, really. I mean, it was nice.
Yeah, culturally. Well, around that time, I mean, the background, I suppose I remember most was, it was Thatcher's years, for a start, from 79 onwards, I think. So... Yeah. And I say that because that played a big part in the scene around Barnsley, with it being a mining town. So at the time, when I was just starting to wear my outlandish clothes and silly haircuts, I would get a lot of stick for it from the surrounding area of. You'd go into a town and have a drink, and you'd get comments from. We used to call them, it's the miners. The miners would give you some grief and beat you up on a Friday night and stuff like that, which is grossly unfair, but that's what it felt like at the time. And so in 84, I think it was, when the miners' strike started, there'd been a bit of a build-up to that.
Yes.
So there was a lot of anger and a lot of, I suppose, tension around the town, particularly our town. Barnsley had, at one point, must have had 20, 30 pits in the area. And there's a massive background of mining history. So Thatcher built in with that, and Barnsley was the headquarters for the mining area. The union was in Barnsley. It kind of led to this tension, I suppose. So when we would go out on a Friday, Saturday night, there'd be a massive release of that tension. And I think it added to a bit of creativity in the town, because at one point there must have been 20, 30 bands all trying to get gigs and trying to do concerts. And I even knew miners that were into bands, I mean, that's why it's unfair that there was always this us and them kind of scenario. Because it was totally unfair, totally unreflective of what it was actually like. But I think it led to there was a lot of creativity at the point.
Yes. Well, it's kind of interesting because, because I always look at that kind of period. There was the glam world, and then there was prog rock and heavy metal, and then, the rise of punk. This is really simplified. But then there's the post-punk period. And then, Thatcher, like you said, she got in 79, and then suddenly all that kind of... The world that was kind of always kind of changing government during the 70s and the 3-day week suddenly really changed. And we had the Falkland War, which kind of had 2 years that, which kind of suddenly kick-started this kind of government, really. And then the miners' strike, like you said. And then just before that, and this is what I kind of realized then, but also talking to all these bands, is that there was a huge amount of unemployment. So if you were slightly left of centre, it was very easy to feel like, well, society doesn't care about us, so we'll just sign on. And there was job seekers allowance and enterprise allowance schemes. And obviously a lot of those indie bands that we loved from the 80s all went on those kind of schemes. And as long as you had £1,000 in the bank account, which I always think is quite...
Well, I went on the enterprise allowance myself. I was on there, so you know your stuff. My enterprise allowance was to start a T-shirt printing company,
right?
Because
yes, I mean you could put.
We wanted some T-shirts printing for the band, so we went to a local community arts workshop.
God, they loved those, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. I mean, it was brilliant, this place. So they got a table with a few screens. You could shoot your screens, print your T-shirts, and we used to dry them T-shirts for the band in front of a 2-bar electric fire to actually dry the ink on them. We did loads of stuff like that. Even like the cover for the first single that's where we printed that, the cloth bag that we produced. So we just screen printed all these bags ourselves and then sewed them together all ourselves. And that was all done at the Community Arts Workshop. And then Steve, who works there, is still a good mate of mine, just one day said, "Oh, have you thought about doing this for a living?" So, the fool. Here we are, 37 years later, still doing it, still got a business doing it. So
fantastic. Yeehaw, in a strange way. But yes, the £1,000 in the bank account was always quite bizarre, wasn't it? Most bands say, "Oh, we just had to pass it from one person to another." And
just pay it in, draw it out, pay it in, draw it out.
And then just hope that everyone's trustworthy at that time. Because it was kind of strange in that way that, with a lot of the bands I've interviewed, there is this kind of straight 5-year narrative. You have that 1 year sort of being unemployed, sort of, and obviously at that age, often sort of smoking and drinking and just being in a band, and then just getting the record played on John Peel, and then suddenly you get the John Peel session, and in those days, and possibly now, I don't know, but every city and town had a alternative night, didn't they? And a venue, a place you could play. Like Norwich had one, Leicester, I'm not going to go around the entire country, but every town had an alternative night, mostly on a Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday part of the week. And for £2 as a punter, you could go and see about 3 bands. So it kind of gave people the chance to feel like at least you're playing and doing something rather than just stuck at home.
It's right. There's a lot of places in Barnsley where you could play, and there's a lot that didn't really get interested in that kind of thing. But that narrative you describe about having the 5-year period, I think that's probably exactly what it was like for me. But I was a little bit younger than the band mates, the other band members. So I was always like the baby, and I didn't really get involved in much of the discussion. It was kind of, straight over my head. He just plays bass, so. Which I didn't mind, I just thought, well, they know what they're doing, or at least I thought they did. But we'd get the gigs, I'd turn up for a gig, I'd write the songs, and I think that's how it progressed. So when Greg left, Martin was doing all the singing, and then Martin suddenly decided that he was going to stop singing and said that, "No, Carl, you're doing the singing now." So it was a strange way how I got into being sort of like the singer and the bass player in the band. But
yes. So
it was all.
Did the bass come quite naturally and easily to you? Because you did mention your parents giving you some musical direction, which you hated, but probably thought, "Thank God for that."
Yeah. I suppose it did. I mean, all I can remember from the piano playing days is the scales, like "Every good boy deserves favour." That's the kind of thing that got drummed into me to learn the scales on the piano. So I did recall that when I started playing bass, but I never played to music. I never looked at music. I never read music. It was just by ear. And I wanted to play like Bruce Foxton or John Jacques Burnell, And,
yes.
So I just listened to bass playing and tried to play it as best as I could, really. And when you can't imagine the joy when Greg and Martin said, "Yeah, I think we'll let you play bass," because I'd played a couple of songs just jamming along. That was the other thing. My mum and dad let us play in their basement. Probably something they totally regret as we were doing it, with massive 4x12 speakers and 2x18 bass bins.
But you must have had very nice neighbours. Or tolerant.
Well, the house was a bungalow which had been dug down to create a little basement. So, and we kind of put egg boxes around the walls and carpets and things like that. We kind of deadened the sound down as much as we could. But yeah, we must have had tolerant neighbours because we used to make a right racket. It was very loud. So we did that for about a year to 18 months, and I think eventually Mum said, "Look, enough's enough." So then we just started practicing local pubs and things like that. But yeah, it was. I was talking to my mum about it the other day, and she said, "Oh, it was lovely, a lovely period."
I know, 40 years ago, Jesus.
Yeah, 40 years.
It's weird, isn't it? So your first single, which was Row the Boat Ashore.
Yes.
Where did you record that in Castleford?
Yeah, it was a studio called Woodlands.
I think this is where Chumbawamba ended up doing a lot of their stuff, didn't they?
Yeah, could have been. The guy that ran it was called Neil. I forgot the lad's second name. Neil Ferguson.
Oh, yes.
He was in a band called the Donkeys, I think, from years previous to that. But yeah, he'd set up his own studio, and he'd got the same arrangement with a cellar, tiny cellar, where he could just he got all the microphones set up, and then his front room was a massive mixing desk, and so he must have had a family that was quite. His wife must have been quite thoughtful.
Yes,
because yeah, it was amazing going to. But that wasn't the first studio. I went to another one in Barnsley, which was called Street Life, where we recorded some other stuff. But the main stuff when we started recording was at Woodlands. Went there a couple of times. Then he moved into a bigger studio in Normanton, I think it was, or Castleford. Not sure where the second one was.
Yeah.
But yeah, he started getting much bigger and a much better studio. But I look back on those recording days and think, how on earth did we do it? Because we didn't have much money. So we were doing like 5 songs in one session. Record the 5 songs in the morning and then mix them down in the afternoon and make sure it's good enough in the evening. And we look back and you think,
and who was your producer at the time? Because that's always quite critical.
We didn't have a producer. We were the producers.
God, I
mean, much arguing amongst us as to how it should sound, and no, that's not fair. We didn't really argue that much. We were just glad to be able to record and get something down. I mean, it's so exciting getting a record produced and travelling down to London to, for the cuttings and things like that. It was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting, because I've interviewed quite a few producers, and one of them was John Porter, who had an amazing CV, and he was asked to step in to sort out the Smiths' first album because they'd recorded it, and Jeff said, look, this is the recording. I don't think it's very good, but could you sort it out? And he listened and went, no, I can't sort this out. We're going to have to go back in the studio and do the whole thing again. And it was like, well, we've got no money. And it's like, well, how much have you got? And he's like, not much. And he said, okay, I'll just do it in a couple of days. So that first album had to be re-recorded. He said it just is not safe. We can't say what you've recorded, but it's dreadful.
Yeah.
But they had to do it really quickly. So again, I suppose in those days, people did sometimes just have to get on with it. I know Black Sabbath recorded their first album, I think, in an afternoon, because it's like, well,
we're in good company then. If Sabbath can do it.
Yes, I think they said, well, look, we've been playing this live, so we'll just come and do it. And there you go, take it away.
So sometimes I've listened back to some of the songs, and I get those, I suppose, self-critical moments where you think, oh, God, I wish I'd had auto-tune, or, I wish I'd had a chance to do that again. But it's just authentic, because that's how it was. You didn't have loads of money. You just had one shot at getting it done. And that was the best you could do. You had to do the best you could do on the day. No matter how many drinks you'd had the night before, you still had to get up and get to the studio and get the job done. So it was just really a case of doing that. And then just with a manager called Steve Drury, who to this day, he did far more than I ever thought he did at the time. Do you know what I mean? I was like oblivious to the behind the scenes work. I thought being in a band was just turning up, playing a song, turning up to a gig. Never really paid much thought to, who actually organised this and booked the van and arranged everything and got us home and that evening. And, so Steve was brilliant amongst all that. So I think Steve was instrumental with Mick as well in getting this repressed together, because he's kept a website going for us.
Right.
Which is partyday.co.uk, I believe. And there's some amazing stuff on there. Just every little piece of archive he finds, no matter how small it is, it goes on there. So I recently spent hours just like clicking through to things. I never knew one of our record sleeves is in the Victoria and Albert Museum in their prints archive. So I thought, what a great claim to fame that is.
That is very good. That is
Yeah.
nice, actually.
I'm going to have to pay a visit to the V&A, I think, and have a look.
Yeah. God, I've been to quite a few exhibitions there, including the David Bowie one a few years ago, David Bowie Is, which was quite a special moment. But then when you came to do your second single, The Spider, this is the one that John Peel played, wasn't it?
Well, he played both. He played a few tracks. He definitely played Row the Boat, and then he latched onto The Spider as well. That at the time, John Peel was the Holy Grail.
Mm-hmm.
If you played on John Peel, it was like, it was just an incredible feeling to listen. John Peel, I remember I used to sit and listen to John Peel with my little ITT tape recorder and press the two buttons down when I wanted to record a song, and then just press it when it stops. And, and John Peel never spoke over the intro of the song.
No.
Because he must have known that people were at home with their little ITT recorders pressing those two buttons just at the start of a song. It's kind of intuitive. You knew when he was going to stop talking, bang, press your two buttons. So I remember listening, because we'd got a notion that he might play the record. And I remember listening, and he just said a few words, and there's one from Barnsley, Party Day. Yeah, click the two buttons, even though I got the song anyway. I still had to record it on the recorder. But
well, he used to often say fingers at the pause button, didn't he? It was one of his little catchphrases.
Well, yeah, probably did, yeah.
And also he hated, because daytime radio 1 in the 80s had all those kind of celebrity DJs, and they just used to almost playing the music was sort of second to their kind of anecdotes and banter. And so I think they used to sort of do all sorts over records. It was like, do I have to play another record? Can't you just hear?
Yeah, it was
just Travis. So he really, I think he kind of just thought, no, it's about the music, not about the celebrity status of being on the radio, So
yeah. So with Peel, he played that. I know we'd got a few players from one or two others at the time, like Kid Jensen and Annie Nightingale and people like that. And that was great because we'd joined the PRS and suddenly we started getting a little bit of money, a few royalties. We were like, well, hey.
Yes, absolutely. I know this must have been very exciting. But you were still But you were still on your own label, weren't you, at this stage?
Yes, we were on his own label, which was Party Day Records. And I'm not sure, like I said, because at the time it was mainly Steve and Martin that were pushing the band in certain directions, and I just thought, well, that's how we're going to go, Party Day Records. I didn't have enough weight of opinion behind me really to look into any further. So I just assumed that that's how we would progress as Party Day Records. It made sense to me. So we joined the cartel, which was the Red Rhino cartel. I think they were based in York, and they distributed all the records. They had their own distribution network to get it overseas and all around the country, and that's how we did the distribution. Really, just gave all the records to Red Rhino, and they did the rest of the work. But
that was still the honeymoon. Sure. That was still the honeymoon phase, wasn't it? Before August,
yes,
slightly pear-shaped later.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's quite a few things we found out later which made us think about exactly how many records we had sold rather than how many we thought we'd sold. But we'll not get into that one.
Yes, I know, tricky, Yes, it's very interesting. But also at that point, because you mentioned about John Peel, but there were the gatekeepers, John Peel and obviously Kid Jensen and Janis Dog. But there was also 3 weekly music papers like NME, Sounds and Melody Maker, and also Record Mirror. But when I spoke to American bands, they went, yeah, but you had weekly papers, so they're going to fill it with anything, aren't they? Unlike a monthly, which is always a bit precious. So it did help create this kind of ever increasing scene, as well as all the venues around the place where
absolutely,
which was amazing, because there was that documentary last week about when Nirvana came to the UK, and there's all these people who were just young kids, booking, the young kid who was booking bands from America, and it's like, we just got this kind of gig, and it was like fair enough.
Yeah, well, that's the guy that was I've not seen that documentary, but I heard about it today. And the guy Anton, who was apparently in that documentary quite a lot,
Anton Brooks.
Anton Brooks was from Barnsley.
Oh,
and he was in a band. He
did
in Bad Moon Publicity.
Yeah, that's right.
Publicity, yeah. Well, he was in a band that I was big mates with Anton during my formative years of drinking in Barnsley Town Centre at the age of 16. 18.
Yes.
And he was in another band that was on the scene at the time called Creatures of Habit. And they used to play the same gigs with us, and we'd sort of like trade band members at certain times. I mean, that band of Liam was also in that band as well. He's my co-director of the business that we still run to this day. So there's quite a lot of crossovers from that period. But Anton left to go to London because I think he must have had a yearning to be more successful in a bigger sphere. And he obviously went on to do that. He was quite successful with a lot of bands, including, Nirvana.
Yes, I know. And I think he did but he did a lot of those indie bands that came through in the late 80s and then early 90s.
Yeah, he did.
I think most people can have that zeitgeist moment where you're really on the scene. You just think, God, everything's going so well. And then the next generation comes along and you're probably not quite so into it or don't quite understand it, and then it's like, oh well, I don't know with Anton, but I know with quite a few people it's often eventually you start to feel a bit like an old man, don't you, at the gig, thinking Jesus, or you have that all that classic Glastonbury moment where you just think everyone's so much younger, and it's like, no, they're the same age, we're just much older, Exactly. The 16 to 18-year-olds are still the same age, it's just that we're now to another
twice that and a few more. Yeah.
So it does have that kind of, you do feel a bit embarrassed when people keep saying that. It's like, no, we did look that young once and we were that pathetic, so let's not knock it. But then anyway, look, then you get to the mid-80s. So yes, the miners' strike, so it was all very Red Wedge, wasn't it, and Socialist Workers' Party. Did that have a big effect on you? Because obviously we had the Redskins, we loved, Billy Bragg, we also kind of loved. And and there was all those other bands like the Bronski Beat and people like that. Did that kind of affect? Did any of that sort of slip into your own musical consciousness?
I think the tensions and the anger at the time, I suppose that slipped into my songwriting and lyrics, and as an impressionable 16 and 17-year-old. So a lot of that might have come into it. There was a lot of stuff like, like the Greenham Common Women and the anti-nuclear stuff and all kinds of things going on. CND stuff, which probably came into I suppose the lyrics. Half of the time I look back now and think, what the hell were you talking about then? But musically, I don't think it did. Musically, I was just trying to create a tune. So was Martin. And between us, if we could create a tune or a nice couple of chords that fit together nicely, then that was good enough for us, really. We'd always try and create some kind of tune or something that you can remember in a song.
Yes.
Because
because listening to the record, it is incredibly instantly accessible, isn't it? They're very well crafted songs which are very like, oh yes, this isn't like Bogshed or Stump or Big Flame, which is a bit like interesting. It was
we did
it's made to be danced, wasn't it?
I mean, Mick was an incredible drummer and still is. He's been in a few bands of late, but I don't think he's actually doing anything at the moment. But these guys were my heroes, Martin and Mick. Because Mick was an incredible drummer. Martin, I thought, was an incredible guy who played guitar. He wasn't the best guitar player, but he could throw a tune or a chord sequence together that would fit with my bass playing perfectly, or I thought.
Yeah.
And it was just, I was just so happy being in the band, to the point where I gave up on A-levels and, things like that. I thought, well, this is the direction for me, being in a band.
A good idea at the time.
Good idea at the time, exactly. So I don't suppose the actual surrounding stuff that was going off at the time influence anything musically. There was a lot of, well, I used to listen to Joy Division and think that they're incredibly downbeat songs, but yet when you can listen to the songs, I'd feel uplifted by that kind of song, like Atmosphere or something like that, you know, one of those songs.
Well, Transmission was always a great one, wasn't it, to dance?
Yeah, Transmission. I mean, I remember seeing that on, what was it, the Tube or something?
I think it was that Anthony Wilson, Tony Wilson program, wasn't it, where he was he presented them. I'm not quite sure. I think the Tube had started when he'd probably...
it was before the Tube. It was before the Tube, you're right. Was it the old Grey Whistle Testing he performed on?
There was that other program that Tony Wilson used to present from Manchester, wasn't there? Which I can't remember, but that was kind of one of their...
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, that's... I suppose that's what maybe I took that musically, I'm not sure. The other band I loved to watch was the Chameleons.
Oh my God, I love their sound is so expansive.
Oh, just my favourite band to this day. And if Mark Burgess is listening, he's a god to me, that guy. I went to see him recently at Home Firth. They've got a brilliant venue at Home Firth. And I went to see them there, and they were just stunningly good. Still to this day, absolutely brilliant. I loved every second. We supported the Chameleons at Leeds Polytechnic, because it was called then. And it's one of my favourite moments in the band, is just thinking, bloody hell, we're supporting the Chameleons. It's like, I can't remember anything about our gig.
Yes.
All I can remember is finishing the gig, coming back down to the front of the stage and just joining in at the front there with all the other guys in the crowd. It was just immense.
Yes, they had such a big sound. I just, to this day, I can't understand how they didn't sort of get to the next level.
No.
U2 or Simple Minds.
Exactly. They deserve to. And I don't understand that either. Some of their songs are just so good.
Yeah, but their album covers were pretty weird.
yeah, you could say that, yeah.
So they were like Marillion kind of prog rock. They didn't go with the music at all. I hope he's not listening. But they were just, didn't sort of fit at all, did they? Like the Smiths had this great kind of image, and I just thought, that's good. You know, they kind of still look all right today, but anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, our image, I don't know what, we've since been classed in the post-punk gothic scenario, you know, with goth band and stuff like that.
I think it's
not quite.
I think it's your Mick Mercer connection, isn't it?
Could be that. We used to wear baggy jumpers and jeans, and I don't know. It was I dare say there was a little touch where we kind of went into the, I suppose, a bit more Kewer-like, you know, a bit more Robert Smith, but.
Well, there was bands like them. I don't know. Was the Mission? There was Sisters of Mercy, Bauhaus.
Sisters of Mercy, yeah.
And there was definitely a kind of that.
Another one was a
bit of a gothic vibe.
Death Cult. The Southern Death Cult, who became Death Cult, who became the Cult. That was another one. In fact, we supported Southern Death Cult as well. Well, no, they were called Death Cult at the time.
Amazing.
That was another favourite moment in my Party Day history. At that gig, we were supporting Death Cult, and I broke a string on my bass on the first song. And being a well-prepared chap that I was, I'd forgotten to bring me extra set of bass strings. So halfway through the song, I'm kind of like gesturing towards their bass player, because he was stood at the side, as if to say, "Can I borrow your bass?" And I just got this blank face, this blank stare, just stared straight through me. Thought, he's not going to lend me his bass. So I had to play an entire set with 3 bass strings. And I'm so proud of myself that I managed to get through without anybody really noticing. So
that's very impressive. So how did you deal? Because I know from the various bass players that singing and playing the bass is quite a tricky little number, though Lemmy from Motorhead did it quite well, and so did Sting, and I suppose Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But it's still... various people have said it's actually quite a tricky thing to do. Did you manage to sort of navigate the dual role quite comfortably?
I suppose, yeah, looking back, I didn't really see it as difficult. It needed to be done, I suppose. Because I just started off by singing little backing vocals. And then as Martin kind of rescinded the responsibility for it, he just through practices, it just became, well, I'll sing this one. I'll sing your song, Martin, yeah. And I never really thought about it. It just happened naturally.
Yes.
I'd always be quite technical with the bass. But then I suppose when I was singing and playing at the same time, the technicality would suffer a little bit on the bass. It would tend to be more of a strum or a thud, that kind of bass playing. But I'd still try and mix other stuff in. I mean, I mentioned Bruce Foxton as a bass player. I used to think he was a genius, some of the unrecognized. I mean, so people just think of Paul Weller with the jam, but Bruce Foxton I thought was absolutely brilliant at driving that band in the background.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I always wanted to do with Mick is create like a solid platform for Martin then just to do what he wanted over the top of it. But as you probably know, Martin left the band in 85.
So had the album, the album Glass House, had that been recorded?
Yes, we'd recorded. Apart from 2 or 3, because he'd left the band. He left through ill health, which to this day is still suffering from that ill health. And he, so we finished recording 2 or 3 of the final songs where I had to, fill in for him to do that. So, but when we released it, he'd left the band. So
did it feel quite difficult at that stage if such a key member wanted the band? I mean, that must have felt really difficult to see somebody struggling like that.
Oh, absolutely! I was absolutely gutted. Like I say, I thought everything about Martin. I kind of like, he was a bit of a hero of mine, and to see that happen, it was a mental health problem. Was just. Well, it really knocked me particularly. I remember feeling I just couldn't believe it was happening. I've never witnessed anything like that. Never come across anything like that. And he ended up in hospital for 3 months. Visiting was just horrible. Visiting, it was like everything you'd think about a mental health institution at the time. It felt like that. It felt very austere and. Not a nice environment. Obviously, it was required.
Yes,
but it was a horrible environment for Martin to be in. It was just gutting for me.
Yeah.
But he came out and tried to come back into the band, but it's not going to work. So we carried on, and then we just got Dean, who was in another band in Barnsley at the time, and he was also working with me at the T-shirt business, and he joined straight away. And so the second album was Dean playing the guitar. So we had one album with Martin, and then the second album with Dean, and it kind of shifted emphasis a little bit on the second album. It was a bit more rocky, I suppose. I'm not sure of the word. I'm not sure how anybody else would describe it. But yeah, and it was a period of change, which I don't think I ever really got over it. The fact that Martin wasn't in the band anymore. Not anything bad against Dean, because he was a fantastic bloke. He was a really good mate of mine, and he's a brilliant guitarist. And I loved being in the band with Dean, but something had gone a little bit, I suppose. I saw Martin recently. Went to see him a few weeks back, and he's come out of hospital again. So 40 years on, he's still struggling with it, and it was just his same old self. And he was just such a nice guy, a really happy, jokey sort of nice sort of guy, and he just sang one of our songs, one of the first songs we've not got recorded, apart from on a cassette. A bit like your C86.
Yes.
It's recorded on a cassette, and he sang the whole song from it all the way through, every lyric, right to the end. And then I found the cassette. Actually, in fact, I found this cassette the other day and played it, and it just brought back so many memories. And he just sang the whole song all the way through. So it was an incredible guy, and such a shame that happened to him and kind of knocked us off balance, really, because it was all going at that point. We were just about to, field sessions were in the mix, and bigger gigs and tours abroad and things like that, and it just scuppered everything really at the time.
God, and also you probably weren't even 20 then, were you? So it must have been quite.
No, about 18, I think, when that happened.
Because things like that, normally we've experienced lots of exciting things in our 50s, but when you're in that age, normally it's a bit carefree and a bit sort of naive, really, isn't it? So
yeah, it is, and I don't think I've really appreciated how that must have been for Martin until I've experienced it myself recently with the Parkinson's. That black cloud that sits on your shoulder every day, and you don't know why it's there, and it just drains you. It's so difficult to get through each day. And he's been suffering like that for 40 years. And it's just such a shame that, but we're getting a bit morose here, but it's an interesting backdrop to what actually happened to the band and how it progressed from that point on.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a hard. I mean, most bands have that honeymoon period, don't they? I sort of talked about the 5-year narrative, and there's a sort of the first few years are kind of quite nice and naive, and everybody's happy, and then there's a few moments, aren't there? Kind of reality checks, on the probably the second or third albums, and lots of touring, and people start getting a little bit sort of tetchy, and conversations that you should have at the beginning, like, to do with who owns what and whose kind of name goes on the songwriting, and what are we going to do with this and that side. We just go, just park it, a bit like Spandau Ballet, and then it all goes terribly wrong when they go to court and get sued, which obviously didn't quite happen with your band. But there you go. It is kind of tricky, because it is those moments where I remember there was a documentary, I think, on a band, The Police. I think when they reformed, there was 3 members and still were. And yes, 2 of the members, Sting and Stuart Copeland, really didn't get on. So they had to have band therapy. And yes, I think to try and cope with the rest of the tour, because actually there was millions of pounds worth of resting on those 2 getting on, and I think they eventually managed to sort of cope and finish the tour. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting one, trying to keep it together. You don't really appreciate it as a fan. You think it must just be the best thing, and everyone's just so happy, and everyone's making loads of money. It's so nice.
Well, for a few years, it was the best thing. It was just. I didn't make any money at all, apart from the money made from the royalties from radio plays. That's the only thing I ever saw. I'm sure Steve Drury, the manager, will say, he lost a lot of money, which I didn't. But anyway, that's another story. God bless you, Steve. God bless you. But yeah, that's what it was all about. It's just about having fun and having enjoyment and being creative, and just being part of the scene, I suppose. There's a big scene in Barnsley and Sheffield. I mean, think of the bands that are in Dance Society, for instance. They were like kind of forging ahead at the time.
Yes. And I know Cherry Red Records just brought out a compilation of Sheffield bands, didn't they, as well, which was...
I don't know.
So that was quite something. So when you did the second album, were you touring, or did you tour much of that, or was that almost the end of the band at that stage?
It was almost the end of it for me. We did quite a few gigs. We didn't do a tour as such, because they were mainly local gigs that we did. When I say local, I mean Yorkshire, Lancashire, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's no impetus from me, and there's no driving force. And Steve had left as well at that point, so he's really down to us as a 3-piece to pick up the pieces. And to be honest, I didn't really want to pick up the pieces at that point. I think, looking back, that's what it was. And so I left the band then, which left Dean and Mick, and then Paul Nash from Dance Society joined. And I think they got another bass player in Sean. They kept going and did some recordings, but never actually released the recordings. I think there's one song on this compilation that's come out called Surge. And that's the one with Dean singing, which I'm really pleased that that's on there.
Excellent.
Because I think they've done a full album's worth, but because they'd not released it, I think when Mick and Steve were planning this, they decided that it wasn't really Party Day that many people would know, so they didn't include it in the mix. But yeah, so and after that, I think the band kept going for another year, 18 months, something like that, and then it just folded completely.
Yes.
So,
and why did you walk away possibly walk away in 1986? What was the moment for you?
Well, looking back, I think I don't think I was enjoying it. I just wasn't enjoying possibly the direction, even though it's me that was writing the bloody songs. Because I did join another band after that called Biff. And we recorded 5 songs, and those 5 songs are still possibly the 5 most liked songs that I personally like, and no one's ever heard them. So it was a new direction that we'd taken. It was still quite indie, but it was a new direction that we'd taken. But we were doing it not to become famous or sell millions of records. We're just doing it because we enjoyed doing it. I think after Martin had left, that's when my realistic view that we could do something together as a band, that's when it faltered, I suppose. And it became more of a chore, practicing 2-3 times a week rather than actually enjoying it.
Yeah.
So I'd rather went into something that I did enjoy, albeit just local and not really of any consequence. You know, it was less pressure, I suppose, to succeed.
But did it feel quite difficult to leave the band, or were you quite?
Yeah. Oh, definitely, because I've got a good relationship with Mick and still have good relationship with Dean. And yeah, it was very difficult to leave. But I don't know, it was just a decision to make, really. When I'd left, I felt a little bit relieved that I'd no longer got that responsibility. So then I started another band, it's just crazy, but that's how it goes.
So was Biff your... there's an echo there. Was Biff your last kind of musical moment?
Yeah, well, I rejoined up with my brother, who was originally with the band before he went to uni.
Yes, great.
And we formed a band splendidly named Pastry Dave and the Obvious Wigs. We had a little Dr. Rhythm drum machine. The early days of drum machines. Well, I had a Dr. Rhythm that I used to control with my bare feet on stage, pressing the buttons with my toes. And then Liam, who was in Creatures of Habit, and Dean, who was in Creatures of Habit, we all got together and decided to form Biff, which I wish we'd probably have pushed that a little bit more. And Dean, to this day, Dean Ormston, asks me every time I see him, we're getting back together. So you never know, at some point we might get back together. We're asking that about Party Day. Is there a possibility we could do something again, me and Mick? Well, obviously it's difficult with Martin. Unfortunately, very sadly, Dean Beckett passed away about 5 years ago after suffering from cancer. So it's the re-release of this stuff is it's kind of bittersweet because I've really enjoyed re-listening to the records, but it brings back a few memories as well, So I'm getting a bit dour here.
Yes, well,
it's just the reality of it. It's just the reality of what's happened and how things just come back later on in life, and I'm really proud of the stuff that it is coming back out, and I really wish we could do some gigs. It's circumstances probably against us on that one, I think.
Yeah, I know it's always tricky because the great thing with Optic Nerve, they've had, I did an interview with the guy from the Nivens from Northumberland, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, as he said, we wouldn't have a clue, there's no way that they would be able to play. They wouldn't know what chords or even what the lyrics are anymore to some of their songs, which is fair enough because it's only 30 years ago.
Well, I have actually got my bass guitar out. It rarely comes out these days, but I got it out when I got the CD and tried strumming along to a few of them. And I think, Christ, how the hell did I manage to play that? It's far too complicated for me these days.
So when you heard all the collection that there's been put together, which is, I have to say, very comprehensive, which was the ones that you were particularly impressed and amazed by?
Well, if I'm honest, I love the earlier stuff. I mean, there's
Carousel.
Carousel's on the first album. I mean, the first album, I love the stuff on there. I love Rabbit Pie because I love Martin's singing. Martin sings on that one, and I always loved his voice. So I could never understand why he didn't want to sing. I think obviously it may have been an anxiety thing, possibly, or I don't know. I'll have to ask him on that.
Yeah.
But on a lot of the songs that Martin sings, I love. I kind of gravitate towards those songs more than the others. But Glasshouse, the original Glasshouse 1982, is one of my favourites. And strangely, there's a song that we'd never put out on a single called Tin Sky, which is it's just a bass line gone mad. I must have had a full bag of midget gems that day when I came up with that bass line. But then I listen to all of them, and sometimes I think, I'm not so keen on that one, and then I change my mind and I think, no, it's quite good, that one. So there's merit in them all for me. I like them all, and I've got some really good, fond memories of the recordings and going to the studios and doing the gigs, and it's just great memories to a point, but there's always tinged with that little bit of sadness about how it turned out.
Yes, I know that's a particularly. Yes, out of all the stories, that's yours has a bit of a different narrative, really, doesn't it? I know it's strange. You just think, God, I've heard most of these, the story of the band now, but yours is a little bit like, God, that is a bit. Even I'm feeling depressed now.
No, let's not get depressed.
No, we're not going to get depressed. Because look, it's a great compilation, and I have to say, for anybody, I'm not just saying it, but I have been playing the record quite a bit in the last few days, and it's absolutely amazing. So I think you must feel chuffed.
Pleased to hear that. Thank you.
It's even though it is a bit bonkers when you think, does this really sound dated now? Because it's nearly 40 years ago, and but it probably does. But at the same time, it still actually sounds fantastic, and it's like, this is really well done. These aren't just kind of. I mean, some stuff that I listened to from the 80s. You don't want to listen to the whole 3-minute song, but because you get the gist. But you just think, that was of its moment. I'm thinking of some of those bands like Bob's or Stump. I mean, there are some brilliant songs, but they are a bit like, wow, yes, I love John Peel playing them back then, but I don't know if I'd sit in my room listening to them all day. Whereas actually, I've had your record on quite a bit, and it's like, oh, actually, this is really good. This has been a fun thing.
Well,
so
pleased to hear it. There's one song called Atoms that I think has kind of had more of an airing than lots of the other songs, because it got latched onto in club scene in Europe and sort of German clubs. I don't know if they're like gothic music clubs or 80s, 90s music clubs. But it got picked up and put on a CD, and it's on YouTube. I discovered we've got quite a lot of stuff on YouTube, unbeknownst to me.
Yes.
We'll put some other stuff on, but it's all there.
Well, actually, that was where I was listening to your album Glasshouse on YouTube, and it had like 55, just under 100,000 views and listens, I suppose. I thought, wow, that's amazing. So, and all the the comments underneath again was like, oh, this is a classic. This is a effing masterpiece. This is a really top album. So, I mean, it's like, this is fantastic. I mean, it is, I think Optic Nerve will do really well with this one, won't they?
Well, I hope so. It's, I feel privileged, to be honest, that someone has actually approached us to do this. It didn't come from us originally, it came from them. And it feels quite an honour to be asked. Because it had all been sort of consigned to the history books for me. So, I mean, even this even spurred me to go and see Martin. So, for any one single reason that this is a good thing, it's because I went and spent some time with Martin 3 weeks ago, and I'll continue to do that from this day.
Yeah.
So, it's brought back some interesting stuff.
And has he enjoyed seeing the album and the interest in the band?
No, not really. He because I took him the CD. Like I said, we all got the one CD each as a payment for this. But I took him the CD, and he just kind of looked at it and just put it on the side. He's got no internet. He's not got a computer. Lives in a tiny flat on his own. But he seemed quite happy. So if he's happy, then that's fair enough. He goes fishing. He's played in a few bands with some mates, and it was so good to see him. I was really chuffed when I came away from there. I was terrified when I went, because I didn't know what I was going to find or who I was going to meet, and what it was going to be like. But it was like I was meeting up with him 40 years ago in the local pub. Put his arms around me, and I put my arms around him. We had a big hug, talked rubbish for 2 hours, and then I left, and that was it. Didn't really discuss Party Day that much. Just he's taking up painting. He gave me a painting, so it was a really, really nice 2 hours.
God, that is nice. I mean, it's not completion, but it sort of feels like it's a nice part of the story, because otherwise I think your life would somehow have that missing something, wouldn't it? These connections can mean so much, which is quite interesting.
You never know. If I go and see him again, he might get his guitar out. I might take my bass, and who knows?
that would be special.
We'll give Mick a ring.
Yes, absolutely. He'd be loving that. But look, if you could have said something to your 16 or 18-year-old self starting out in this interesting world that is music and creativity, is there anything that you would have thought, God, I would have just whispered that in their ear, even if they ignored it?
I think creativity for me is to try and stay creative and not get bogged down with day-to-day trivial nonsense. That was, I suppose, that when you're happy and you've got the least responsibility, I think that's probably when you're most creative. And I think maybe when I'd got extra responsibility, when Martin left and Steve left, it became less happy, therefore I got less creative. But also just, I don't know, really. It's a difficult question. What would I say to a 16-year-old? Just have fun. Just enjoy yourself. Just have a good time. Enjoy yourself. And if you're being creative and you're in a band, just go for it. And we employ a guy at work, James, and he's a drummer. And they're in a band that are getting a lot of popular votes, and they've got even like up to 1 million views on 1 million plays on Spotify. He's in a band called Caskets, and he doesn't know this, but I'm so excited for him, because he comes to work and he does his screen printing. He prints T-shirts and hoodies and polo shirts, and then he goes off into this band arena where it's completely different to when I were in a band. They've done all the marketing beforehand, before they've even done a gig. They've done all the recordings. I think this is crazy. It's back to front. They've got a massive audience before they've done gigs, but they're gigging now, and they're touring America next year and things like that. And I'm just so excited for him. And it's like, because he's young, do it now, because we've discussed it. You get older in life, things happen, shit happens, and it becomes more and more difficult to get that done.
Yes, absolutely.
So you got to grasp it while it's there, really, when you get the chance, when you get the chance to do it.
Yes, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. You always think, yes, I'm going to do a bit of traveling next year. And then suddenly, something happens. And then perhaps next year, and then there's that point where you think, I'm never going to go traveling. I'll just go away for 2 weeks. And, the long break to go and discover yourself never really happens, does it? So.
Well, I've been converting my cellar into a recording studio, or thinking about it, for the last 4 to 5 years. So at some point, I will do it.
Yes, get the egg boxes out and you'll be fine.
That's it, egg boxes and blankets.
Blankets, absolutely. Well, look, this has been amazing. So when I put this together and put it out, I can always send you a link, and then you can put it, or I can send it to your chap who does the website, actually, Steve Drury. And then
Steve Drury, yeah.
There you go. He'll love that. I did notice, and I have to say, is he the person who does your Wikipedia page? Because he's someone's put that really up to date with their.
I think he is. Yeah. I'll be honest with you, I've not spoke to Steve in years, but I do know he's been keeping that up to date. It's an amazing job, really, keeping that up to date. Because when I look at it sometimes, I think, bloody hell, I've forgotten all about that. Or I didn't. There's some things I didn't even know myself.
Yes.
That he puts on there. I think, really. I mean, a lot of the John Peel stuff was with Steve, was doing, kind of negotiations with getting that stuff done. So I'm not fully up to speed on the full story with the John Peel. So, but that's how it goes. That's what managers are for.
Yes, well, I mean, he's keeping the flame anyway, so that's.
Oh, absolutely. He's doing a good job.
Well, look, thank you ever so much for your time for this, and really appreciate it. And again, I really love listening to the album, actually. So it'll be great, and I really hope Optic Nerve do well as well, because Ian is such a nice guy, and let's face it, it's a labour of love.
I'm pleased to speak to you. It's been a privilege for me.
Yeah. Well, look, take care, and all the best for the future.
Yeah.
And, I'll say goodbye now. But anyway, good night.
All right.
See you later.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
And that, dear listener, is how you end a conversation. Or not. Anyway, I love leaving that last bit in. Just always amazes me and makes me cringe. Anyway, look, a massive thank you to Carl Firth for giving me the time for that interview. That was from Party Day. And as I mentioned, probably at the beginning and during the interview, Optic Nerve Recordings have released a compilation of their recordings. Do check it out. It's absolutely beautiful, he says confidently. Anyway, if you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. Also, all these interviews have been archived. Aren't you lucky? So you can find those on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. It's true. Anyway, have a great week and stay safe.